Imagine this. You wake up one morning and find yourself on trial. You don't know what you've done wrong. No one will explain the charges, yet the court insists you're guilty. Or picture this. You open your eyes and discover that overnight, your body has transformed into something monstrous, something no longer human. Sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it? And yet, for Franz Kafka, this was not just imagination. It was the essence of existence. Kafka's world is one where the ordinary twists into the absurd, where human beings are swallowed whole by invisible systems, and where the simplest acts, speaking, working, even existing, become heavy with dread. His writing is suffocating and surreal, and yet strangely familiar, as if he were describing the very air we breathe today. Why does Kafka matter now, more than a century after his death? Because the strange, haunting world he wrote about has become our reality. We too are caught in endless systems, governments, corporations, algorithms, social media platforms that watch us, judge us, and confuse us with rules we don't understand. And this is where the word Kafkaesque comes in, a term that has become shorthand for life's strangest frustrations. But to understand why our generation resonates so deeply with Kafka, we have to start with the man himself, who he was, how he lived, and why his vision of the world was so dark and yet so illuminating. Franz Kafka was born in 1883 in Prague, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His family was Jewish, living in a city where languages, cultures, and identities collided. German was his first language, but Czech surrounded him daily. This tension between worlds would follow Kafka for his entire life, a feeling of never fully belonging anywhere. But the deepest conflict came from within his own home. His father, Hermann Kafka, was a towering, domineering figure, a successful self-made businessman who demanded toughness and obedience. Franz, on the other hand, was thin, sensitive, and introverted. Everything his father despised. Their relationship was not simply strained, it was crushing. Kafka once wrote a 45-page letter to his father, describing the psychological wounds of growing up under his shadow. He never sent it. Perhaps he knew his father would never understand. This suffocating father figure became a ghost in his stories, a symbol of oppressive authority, of rules that cannot be questioned, of judgment that cannot be escaped. In many ways, Kafka's personal life was the raw material of his philosophy. By day, Kafka worked as an insurance clerk. His job was safe, predictable, and miserable. Mountains of paperwork, endless files, the monotony of bureaucracy, the very stuff of his nightmares. And yet, this gave him first-hand experience of the systems that would later populate his fiction. He knew exactly what it felt like to be swallowed by an office, to be reduced to a number in a file. By night, he wrote, quietly, obsessively, with a kind of desperation. His stories often came from dreams, but they were not fantasy. They were more real than reality itself. Kafka's health was frail. Tuberculosis haunted his final years. Love, too, was a source of torment. He was engaged multiple times, but always broke it off, convinced that marriage and family would destroy his ability to write. For Kafka, writing was not just a passion, it was survival. And yet, here is the most Kafkaesque twist of all. When he was dying in 1924, at only 40 years old, he instructed his friend Max Brod to burn all his unpublished manuscripts. Destroy everything. Let nothing survive. Max Brod refused. Against Kafka's wishes, he published The Trial, The Castle, America, and many more. The world we know today, a world where Kafkaesque is part of our language, exists only because Brod disobeyed his closest friend. So, who was Kafka? a fragile man haunted by his father, trapped in a job he hated, torn between love and art, and consumed by illness. And yet, out of that suffering, he gave us stories that describe the human condition with a clarity no one else has matched. From this strange, tormented life emerged a style of writing so unique, so haunting, that it became a word of its own. And that's where we turn next to understand what Kafkaesque really means. To understand Kafka's power, you have to imagine how he wrote. His stories begin in ordinary places, a bedroom, an office, a courtroom, but very quickly the ground tilts beneath your feet. A sun becomes a giant insect. A man is arrested but never told his crime. A surveyor is called to a village, but the castle that summoned him keeps him endlessly waiting. Kafka's genius was this. He took the familiar and made it strange. He never wrote about distant fantasy lands or dragons or gods. His monsters were bureaucrats. His labyrinths were office corridors. His villains were the invisible systems we walk through every day. His themes cut into the heart of modern existence. Alienation, the sense of being disconnected from others, from work, even from one's own body. Guilt, not because of something you've done, but because of existing at all. Bureaucracy, the endless paper trails, rules, and officials that never explain themselves. Identity, the struggle to understand who we are in a world that constantly labels and reduces us. The absurd, a universe that follows no clear rules, yet insists that you obey them. Kafka's style was deceptively plain. His sentences were calm, almost clinical, and yet within them lived a crushing, dreamlike tension. His characters rarely rebel in grand gestures. They shuffle, they plead, they despair. They are both tragic and painfully human. Consider the Metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa wakes up as an insect. But the story is not about the transformation. It's about his family's response. At first, they pity him. Then, they tolerate him. Eventually, they reject him, lock him away, and forget him. Gregor's death is quiet, almost welcomed. The true horror is not the insect's body, it's the indifference of the world, or the trial. Joseph K. is arrested without explanation. He spends the rest of the book trying to navigate an opaque legal system. He never learns his crime. He never gets clarity. The book ends with his execution, carried out with bureaucratic efficiency. The system, cold and faceless, simply swallows him whole. Then there's the castle. A man is summoned to a village by the mysterious castle that governs it, but once he arrives, he cannot gain entry, cannot speak to those in power, cannot find answers. The novel is unfinished, which makes it even more haunting, as if Kafka wanted the frustration of incompleteness to live on forever. Reading Kafka is like wandering into a dream that you cannot wake from. Everything looks familiar, and yet nothing makes sense. The walls close in, the rules change, and yet somehow it feels like home. That is Kafka's gift, to expose the hidden dread inside ordinary life. And this is what gave rise to a word that now defines him, Kafkaesque. Kafkaesque is one of those words people throw around casually to describe anything weird, confusing, or surreal. But that's not quite it. To be Kafkaesque is not just to be strange. It is to be trapped in a system that is both absurd and inescapable. A truly Kafkaesque situation has 4 elements. Bureaucratic absurdity, rules that make no sense yet must be followed. Power without face, authority that is everywhere, yet no one takes responsibility. Alienation, the individual reduced to nothing in the eyes of the system. Hopelessness, no escape, no explanation, no clear way forward. Think of being caught in a government office where every form leads to another form, every official sends you to another office, and no one can answer your questions. or calling customer service only to be transferred endlessly between robots and representatives who apologize but cannot solve your problem. Think of job applications where algorithms decide your worth before a human ever sees your name, or immigration systems that hold lives hostage in endless paperwork, or even online platforms where a single post can get you banned by an invisible moderator you can never contact. This is Kafkaesque, the ordinary made suffocating by unseen structures. The surreal nightmare is not a dream, it's daily life. And the most unsettling part, Kafka wrote all this in the early 1900s, before the internet, before mass surveillance, before big data, before artificial intelligence. He saw it coming. He sensed that the future would be ruled not by tyrants with swords, but by systems with forms, files, and faceless judgments. When people say, "That's Kafkaesque," what they're really saying is, "This feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. This feels like being swallowed by something I can't even name." That's why Kafka matters today. Because his fiction turned out to be prophecy. Here's the strange thing. Kafka never saw the world we live in. He never scrolled on a smartphone, never argued with an algorithm, never waited for a customer service chatbot to connect you to a representative. And yet, it feels like he described our exact reality. Why? Because the structures he wrote about, invisible, absurd, suffocating, have only grown stronger in our time. Think about bureaucracy today. In Kafka's day, it was paper stacked on desks. Today, it's digital forms, endless passwords, faceless automated emails, and terms and conditions no one reads, but everyone must obey. The system has migrated online, but it hasn't become clearer. It's just faster, colder, and even more confusing. Then there's social media. Kafka's characters lived under constant judgment by courts, by officials, by unseen authorities. Sound familiar? In our age, judgment comes in the form of likes, comments, and the silent algorithms that decide what we see, what we don't, who rises and who disappears. Every post is a trial, every profile a case file. We don't know the rules, but we feel their weight. Kafka also resonates because of alienation. Despite all our connections, many people today feel lonelier than ever. We work remotely, date through screens, and measure our worth by numbers, salary, followers, grades, views. Kafka knew this loneliness. He lived it. And when we read him, we recognize ourselves in his characters, isolated, confused, trying to hold on to dignity in a world that doesn't seem to care. There's also the economy. Many young people feel trapped in jobs they hate, under crushing student debt, stuck in systems they didn't design and can't escape. Kafka's Gregor Samsa, working tirelessly to support his family, only to wake up one morning as an insect and be discarded when he's no longer useful, becomes an almost perfect metaphor for the disposable worker of today. And then there's mental health. Kafka battled anxiety, depression, and self-doubt his entire life. He often felt like a burden, like someone who didn't quite belong in the world. This is exactly how many in our generation feel in an age of burnout, existential dread, and relentless comparison. This is why Kafka feels prophetic. He didn't just describe his own nightmares, he foresaw ours. He gave shape to the invisible pressures that define modern life. He whispered to us across a century, "You are not alone in feeling powerless. You are not crazy for finding life absurd. The system really is broken, and your confusion is valid." Now, here's the twist. People often think Kafka is only about despair, only about hopelessness. But if you read him closely, you'll find something else, something strangely empowering. Kafka doesn't tell us how to win against the system. He tells us how to live within it. His lessons are not about conquering, but about surviving with dignity, humor, and awareness. Lesson 1. Embrace the absurd. Life doesn't always make sense, and maybe it never will. Kafka's characters struggle because they demand answers from systems that have none. The lesson is not to wait for clarity, but to keep moving despite confusion. Freedom comes not from solving the absurd, but from accepting it. Lesson 2. See the system for what it is. Kafka reveals the machinery behind everyday life. The paperwork, the trials, the judgments, all of it is designed to confuse. Once you see this, you're no longer fully trapped. Awareness itself is a kind of rebellion. When you laugh at the absurdity of being on hold for 3 hours with an airline, you're already freer than Joseph K., who never stopped begging for explanations. Lesson 3. Dignity in resistance. Even when victory is impossible, resistance still matters. Kafka's characters rarely escape, but they fight in small ways. They question, they search, they endure. In our world, too, you may not be able to beat the system, but you can refuse to let it crush your humanity. You can stay kind, creative, authentic, even when everything pushes you toward conformity. Lesson 4. Authenticity is power. Kafka poured his deepest fears, insecurities, and contradictions into his writing. He didn't pretend to be strong or certain. He was vulnerable, painfully honest. And yet, that honesty is why his work survives. In an age of curated images and fake perfection, Kafka reminds us that showing the raw truth of who we are is a radical act. Lesson 5. Meaning is in the search. Kafka knew that life doesn't hand us a clear purpose, but he also knew that searching itself gives life weight. His characters wander, question, and seek, often without finding. But the act of seeking is itself meaningful. It's a reminder that even if life is absurd, our response to it doesn't have to be. In the end, Kafka's philosophy is not about despair. It's about clarity. He shows us the bars of the cage, not so that we give up, but so that we stop blaming ourselves for being trapped inside. And once you see the cage, you can start to imagine ways of living beyond it, not by breaking it, but by outgrowing it. The beauty of Kafka is that his work doesn't belong to the past. It keeps mutating, like one of his own characters, reshaping itself to fit the age that reads it. Take the gig economy. Millions of people today work as delivery drivers, freelancers, rideshare operators, or remote contractors. They log into apps that decide when they get paid, how much they earn, and whether they even have work tomorrow. They don't know the rules behind the algorithm. One bad rating, one faceless decision, and their livelihood disappears. This is pure Kafka, the worker trapped inside a system that controls them invisibly, without explanation. Or consider dating apps. You swipe endlessly, judged by photos, filtered by algorithms, scored by invisible metrics. People become profiles, love becomes data, and the very act of searching for intimacy feels mechanical. Kafka's stories of alienation suddenly feel prophetic here too. Not because people don't want connection, but because the systems mediating connection strip it of its humanity. Then there's healthcare. Patients lost in insurance paperwork, bounced between departments, waiting months for approval. The human being in pain becomes a number in a file. The system doesn't heal, it processes. Kafka would have understood this. A system that insists it exists for your good, but crushes you in its machinery. But Kafka wasn't only writing about systems. He was also asking spiritual questions. His characters long for meaning, for God, for answers from authority. Yet the castle remains silent. The court never explains. The heavens are mute. Some see this as despair, but others see it as strangely liberating. A reminder that meaning is not handed down, but created within us. Here's another angle. Kafka and humor. Yes, humor. It's easy to miss, but his writing is laced with dark comedy. Bureaucrats tripping over paperwork, characters apologizing for crimes they don't know, absurd delays stretched to infinity. Kafka teaches us that sometimes the best weapon against the absurd is laughter. To laugh at the system is to step outside its grip, even if just for a moment. Kafka also challenges our idea of freedom. We often think freedom means doing whatever we want, but Kafka shows that in a world full of invisible rules, freedom is not escape. It's awareness. It's the ability to see the system clearly, to refuse blind obedience, and to preserve your humanity even when the world treats you like an insect. And perhaps the freshest angle of all, Kafka as a mirror of you. When you read Kafka, you don't just see his characters, you see yourself. Your confusion at the DMV, your dread opening another rejection email, your frustration with automated systems, your loneliness scrolling through endless feeds. Kafka doesn't give us answers, he gives us recognition. And sometimes recognition is the first step toward change. So why does Kafka still matter a century after his death? Because he revealed something timeless. The systems that govern our lives are absurd, often meaningless, and rarely just. He showed us the nightmare hidden inside the everyday. But he also gave us something deeper, the tools to endure it. He taught us to name the absurd when we see it, to laugh at the systems that pretend to be logical but are anything but, to accept confusion as part of the human condition rather than a personal failure, to search for meaning even when the world offers none. In the end, Kafka was not a prophet of despair. He was a prophet of awareness, and awareness is power. Think back to that opening image. Waking up accused of a crime you don't understand, or transformed into something unrecognizable. Kafka's characters rarely escape those nightmares, but you, the reader, do. Because when you put down his book, you carry with you a new vision of the world, sharper, clearer, more awake. The Kafkaesque may never disappear. The systems will always be there. But the more we see them, the less they can consume us. So, the next time you find yourself trapped in an endless line, or arguing with a faceless system, or feeling like the world doesn't make sense, remember Kafka. Remember that you're not alone. And remember that by recognizing the absurd, you've already taken the first step toward freedom. Because here's the truth. The system may be absurd, the rules may be invisible, the world may be Kafkaesque, but your awareness, your refusal to be swallowed, that is your power. And if this journey through Kafka's strange and haunting world spoke to you, then let's keep exploring these ideas together. Leave a comment with your thoughts, share this video with someone who feels trapped in the system, and subscribe for more deep dives into philosophy and the hidden patterns of our lives. Your engagement helps this community grow, and together we can keep shedding light on the world's most absurd truths. See you in the next one.